A contractor quoted me almost $20,000 to build a paver patio and a fireplace in my backyard, so I was like, screw that, I'm gonna try and build my own so I can save some money. Our two dogs have pretty much turned part of the yard into a literal sand pit, so we're gonna build a big 18 by 20 paver patio to try and reduce the amount of dirt that comes into the house and also have a pretty cool place to chill. After removing the old pavers, which we plan to reuse, we rented a tiller to help break up the dirt to make it a lot easier to move around. We basically have to make this area as flat as possible so that the pavers will also lay nice and flat and they're not all wobbly. Once all the dirt was broken up, I used a metal rake and a shovel to try and flatten everything out the best that I can. The goal wasn't to make it perfect, I was basically going off a feeling here to try to make it as flat as possible. Then I just basically used a 2x4 and started screeding back and forth to try and find high spots and dips. This was a hell of a workout to do, and at the time that I'm voiceovering this video, I'm still sore. After doing that terrible workout, I rented a compactor and went around the entire area so I can compress the hell out of the dirt. We went around the entire area 3 or 4 times, making sure that there's a slight pitch angled away from the house so when it rains, the water tends to flow away from the house and not toward it. We also used a level and a 2x4 to continue to screed the ground to make it as flat as possible before returning the compactor. Now that the ground is nice and flat, we're going to lay some weed barriers so that the weeds don't end up growing through the paver cracks. The next step was to add some leveling sand. We ended up going with a local supplier because each bag at Home Depot was like $8 and we would have needed over 100 of them. We ended up getting all this sand for like $200 and it was delivered to our house. But after it was delivered, my son and I spent the rest of the day wheeling it to the backyard. Before laying the pavers, we're going to go ahead and build a small wall that'll separate the rest of the yard from the paver patio. For the base, we're doing leveling sand, paver base, paver, then basically just repeating the same process over and over until it's all finished up. Once the first row was all finished up, we cleaned them off with a broom so we can add some of this construction adhesive to glue on the next row. But I ended up getting ahead of myself and completely forgot that I had to stagger the blocks. Thank God the glue was still wet, so I was able to just move them over a little bit and go ahead and cut a block in half. To cut the block in half, I just made a quick measurement and used the good old wood chisel and just struck around the entire block over and over until it just broke in half. I then glued on the end pieces, started to add another layer and ended up running out of blocks halfway through. And instead of just wasting away the day going to the store and getting more, I decided let's just start laying some pavers. Installing pavers is one of those things that sucks to do, and after you're done, you end up looking at it wondering if it was worth it or not. In this case, I hope it's worth it because the amount of pain that my back is about to be in won't be fun. To install the pavers, I'm using these really cool paver bases that make it so you don't need to add any rocks and only a ½ inch of leveling sand, which is pretty cool if you ask me. To level out the sand, we're using these pieces of ½ inch PVC, digging them into the sand and making sure they're pitched away from the house, then screeding over it till the sand is nice and level, adding the paver base, then the paver, and repeating the same process over and over until the entire patio is all finished up. The only downside I see about these paver bases is that they're $11 each, which is pretty damn expensive, especially if you're doing a big patio like this, but it ends up saving you a lot of time. I mean, once we got our system down, we were flying through it. If you're wondering how we got the pavers to the backyard, we just ended up borrowing the neighbor's golf cart, which helped a lot, so thank you and shout out to Tom. We ended up laying 218 pavers in just 2.5 days, including all the work you guys have already seen. And for the price, stick around to the end of the video and I'll give you guys an exact cost breakdown. Since there's a drop off at the end of the pavers, we're gonna add a step that can lead to the gym. Unfortunately, I need to remove a couple of the pavers that I already installed so I can add some blocks underneath, just to give the step some good support so it doesn't cave in over time. After I installed the blocks, I put the pavers back where they belong, added a few more pavers for the bottom step, then did the good old hold my breath for a couple seconds while I cut this paver in half. Since we all know you don't want to breathe this stuff in, and since I was only cutting one paver, I said screw it, why not? Since this side of the patio has a drop off, I'm going to build a small retention wall to help keep all the sand in so the water doesn't wash it away over time. To do so, I'm just mixing up an 80-pound bag of concrete, then adding it to all the edges of the paver patio. This isn't only going to keep the sand in, but it's also going to lock all the pavers into place so they don't move while you walk on them. I used the concrete edging trowel to give it a nice finished look, then basically just repeated the same process over and over until the entire patio was completely finished up. After 2 bags of concrete and a couple hours of doing this, the entire paver patio was all trimmed out. It's finally time to lock all the pavers into place, and to do so, we're going to use some of this polymeric sand. This stuff is really cool because you just spread it in between all your paver cracks, wet it, let it cure for a day, and it hardens up, allowing your pavers to never move. We just dumped it onto the pavers, then spread it out using a deck brush and a broom. After spreading it out, I went around the entire patio with the tamper just to make sure it falls in between all the cracks properly. I then used a leaf blower to lightly remove any of the excess that was left on top of the pavers. The next step was to lightly mist all the pavers and let it set for 2 minutes so the polymeric sand can start to harden. After a few minutes, I gave it a good rinse, and I was really happy to see the water naturally flowing away from the house. We then took a break and let it sit for a couple days. After waiting a few days, we decided to seal the entire patio before we do anything else. We're using a product called Black Diamond Wet Look Stone Sealer. We've used this product in the past, so we know that it works really well, especially protecting from stains, and it's also really hydrophobic. I'm going to link it in the description below, along with a bunch of other things that we use in this video, just in case you guys plan on doing this on your own. But after sealing all the pavers, the entire patio was all finished up. Now that the patio's finished up, it's time to build an outdoor fireplace. This is something I've never done before, but after doing a bunch of research online, it seems pretty doable. My wife's been obsessed with Pinterest lately, and after showing me a bunch of ideas, I came up with a design that I think will work and got straight to it. I started by digging out a spot and making some forms where I can lay a footer. I used 2x4s for the forms and made sure they were nice and level, then filled the bottom of the hole with about an inch thick of small rocks. I then used a tamper and compressed the crap out of all the stones. My son and I then mixed a bunch of concrete that we can pour into the forms. We poured in enough concrete to fill in about half of the form, spread it out, then added some of this rebar on top just to make sure this thing stays together well. After adding the rebar, we topped it off with concrete, screeded it, and then let it sit for a couple days. After waiting about a day and a half, it was finally time to take off the forms. The fireplace is going to live on top of this pad, so to stick on the cinder blocks, we're going to mix together some Type S mortar and set it in between each block. I laid some mortar onto the pad, then the block, and made sure that it was nice and level. Then repeated the same process over and over until I had the first row of blocks done. I used a square on the corner to make sure everything is squared out nicely, then filled in the center with more blocks. Once the first layer was done, I went ahead and repeated the same process and added another layer. I had a bunch of leftover sand from the pavers, so I decided to fill in some of the holes with some of the extra sand. I didn't pour any sand into any of the corners because I wanted to fill it up with concrete from the bottom up. After filling in all the corners with concrete, I put a 4-foot piece of rebar into each one. I then filled in the rest of the cinder blocks with concrete and let them sit overnight. The next day, the concrete was nice and dry, so I went ahead and added more cinder blocks on the back side and the sides of it, leaving the front side open. I continued to fill all the corners with concrete all the way up to the top, just to help give it that structural integrity that I'm looking for. On the last row, I left 2 spots empty without any cinder block, because I'm going to pour a form that'll span across from one side to the other side. I cut down some 2x10s to size and started fitting in my form. This is basically a temporary mold that I'm going to fill in with concrete, let it sit for a couple days, then take it back off. Once it dries, it'll basically work as a bridge to allow me to keep stacking blocks on top of it while leaving the bottom open. I then mixed together a bunch of concrete and started filling in the mold. I only filled it halfway so I can add a few pieces of rebar, which might be overkill, but it's definitely not going to hurt. I then filled the rest of the mold with concrete, used the mallet to tap all the bubbles out, and let it sit for a couple days. While the concrete dries, we're going to install the world's first ready-to-use robot lawnmower. This is a robotic lawnmower that doesn't only cut your grass, but also drives itself back to the base station to charge itself once it finishes up. I'm going to lay some pavers on this side of the house where I can install the home base because it's close to power and has really good Wi-Fi. The home base is basically a garage where the robot lives at and stays nice and charged up until you need to use it. I'm screwing mine directly into the pavers to make sure it's nice and secure, then adding on the roof to protect it from rain and sunlight, connecting it to power, then going through the setup process, which is super simple. I first turned the machine on, then set it into the home base and let it charge up to 100%. Once it was fully charged up, I downloaded the Eufy app, connected it to Wi-Fi, then it automatically started mapping out my yard. It took less than 5 minutes to set up and is honestly one of the craziest things that I've ever seen. It went around the entire yard creating a map that it can remember, so when it cuts your grass, it remembers exactly where to go. Once it finished mapping out the yard, it just started cutting the grass all by itself. It also has an obstacle avoidance feature, and it can avoid things like pools, trees, pets, people, and anything else that it can come across. You can also adjust how short you want it to cut the grass, the travel speed, and the blade speed. It's got a built-in GPS plus a 4G transmission to provide positioning, which also prevents it from being stolen. It's got an emergency stop on it with a clear battery display, replaceable blades, and it's also really lightweight. The tires have a lot of grip and can do up to a 40-degree slope. The cameras on the front allow you to have a live view of exactly what it's doing. You can also set up multiple zones so you can cut the front and the back of your yard, or maybe even a neighbor's yard. And if the battery is about to die, it'll return itself to the home base automatically, then continue on with its task once it's charged up. Overall, I give this Eufy robot a 10 out of 10. If you guys want to get one, I'm going to link it in the description below. Now that the concrete that we poured earlier is nice and dry, we're going to go ahead and take off the forms. We let it dry for about 3 days, and after taking off the forms, I'm honestly pretty impressed. I'm installing these metal corner trims in order to make the top smaller so I can keep building up this chimney. The metal's just going to hold up the other side of the pavers so they don't cave in over time. Once I finished installing the pavers, the hole at the top was smaller so I can keep building up. I basically just repeated the same process as the bottom portion and added 4 more layers. The fireplace was turning out really nice, but it was starting to look like something straight out of a Minecraft game. So to fix that problem, I added a bunch of pieces of pavers that I cut out earlier. Then I added less water to the stucco mix to make it thicker so it's a lot easier to manage. I worked the mortar over and over until it started to harden and set into place. After letting it sit for 24 hours, it was nice and hard. Then it was finally time to add the first layer of stucco. This is a pretty straightforward process to do. You pretty much just stick the stucco onto the wall, add some stucco mesh, then just repeat the same process over and over until the entire thing is covered. I realized that some of the stucco kept falling off the wall as I was trying to install it, and that's because my stucco mix didn't have enough water inside of it, so I watered it down a little bit and it stuck much better. While the first layer of stucco dries, I'm going to install some pavers to the top of it to cap it off. These are just 12 by 12 pavers that I installed upside down so you can see the bevel. Made sure they were level, then it was finally time to install the top cap. This beast weighs over 80 pounds and I had to bring it to the top of the fireplace all by myself, so you can imagine how sketchy it was climbing up the ladder with it. I just placed some blocks on each corner so the smoke can come out, and I didn't even use any adhesive because this thing is so heavy, there's just no way it'll ever move. The next step was to start adding fire block to the inside of it. I'm going for a herringbone pattern, and to do so I just laid all the fire brick out on the ground, made my pattern, then cut out a piece of wood that's the exact size of the inside of it, laid it on top of it, traced it, then cut all the pieces out one by one until they were all cut out. To glue the fire brick to the inside of the fireplace, I'm using this fire block sealant that's made by 3M, and basically just adding a bead to each one, installing it onto the wall, and repeating the same process over and over until the entire wall was all finished up. Installing them was pretty straightforward and honestly really satisfying. The only crappy part was the price. It cost $42 for every 6 pieces, which made this the most expensive part of the entire project. I'll give you guys an exact cost breakdown at the end of this video. I ended up running out of fire block to do the bottom part, and the stucco was dry, so I just went ahead and added another layer. This is the final layer of stucco, so I tried my best to make it look as nice as possible because paint's gonna go right on top of this and that'll be the finished product. After spending the rest of the day installing the stucco, this fireplace was really starting to come together, and honestly, looking incredible. I let it sit for 48 hours to make sure the stucco was nice and dry, then it was time to paint it. We wanted the fireplace to be a lighter color so it can match the house, so we chose the color Patient Beige. Actually, my wife chose the color, I'm not going to take any credit for it, I just agreed. We ended up adding 2 layers to it because the stucco just kept absorbing the paint, but then just like that, the entire fireplace was all finished up. Now that the fireplace is all finished up, it's time to cap off the wall to give it a nice finished look. I just used some brick and stone adhesive and glued them on one by one, and that was it. The next step was my favorite part of the entire project. We spent a bunch of time at Lowe's buying a bunch of plants, which as some of you guys know is like a therapy to me. They honestly make everything look so much better, and they're going to transform my yard into a peaceful place that I can just chill out at and relax. I made some pretty deep holes, then added some potting mix at the bottom, then the plant on top and some potting mix around it, just to give it some extra nutrients so it can grow better. And of course we're not just going to leave them like that, so we added some of this trim, some weed barrier, and some mulch. We ended up repeating the same process on the other side and ended up finding this old Pepsi bottle that was from 1986. I washed it off and decided to keep it. It'll be a good talking point when people come to the backyard and chill. We wanted some outdoor furniture for the patio, but some of the prices we were seeing online were just absolutely ridiculous. So I picked up some kiln-dried pressure-treated wood from my local lumber yard, drew out the design that I wanted, and just started to make it. I miter cut 4x4s for the legs, glued them and screwed them together, and used clamps to make sure the glue bonds the wood nicely so it doesn't warp over time. I then sanded the crap out of the legs, used the router to round out all the edges, Then set the legs aside so I can start building the base. The design of the base is super simple. I'm basically just making a box, then screwing a 2x4 every 3.5 inches in between it and using a 2x4 as a spacer. This is what the cushions are going to sit on top of, so I'm making sure I'm not spreading them apart too much so the cushion doesn't fall in between the cracks. Once I finished with that, I went ahead and brought the legs over and clamped them into place. Then used 3.5-inch exterior screws to fasten the base to the legs. To install the backrest, I just cut out these triangle shapes, then fasten them onto each leg. These lean back a little, which will make the bench a lot more comfortable to sit on. I then screwed on some 2x4s for the backrest, sanded it one more time, then stained it with some exterior stain. Normally you would have to wait for pressure treated wood to dry before you can stain it or seal it, but I spent the extra money to buy kiln dried so I don't have to wait. I let it dry in my garage for a day, then brought it to the backyard. I bought these cushions on Amazon and made sure to make the measurements based off the cushions to make sure they fit properly. The next step was to install the world's first cinema grade outdoor projector. So I added some cement inside of these flower pots, then put these metal posts inside of them and let them sit overnight. They're gonna hold up this projector screen that I bought on Amazon, which will make the all-around experience in this backyard be pretty insane. Nebula sent us the cinema kit that comes in this metal box. Inside are cinema grade Wi-Fi speakers. They connect directly to the projector to give you an all-around sound system for the best experience. They also have an inflatable couch. It also comes with 2 microphones for the ultimate karaoke nights. The Nebula projector is the star of the show, featuring a 4K laser smart projection, built-in Google, built-in Netflix, a real glass lens, and a one-click AI spatial adaptation system for the best fit on any screen. It also has a move-in zoom so you can manually make your screen bigger and smaller. The back has HDMI ports, USB ports, USB-C ports, and a comfortable carrying handle. Now the picture is incredible. The 4K Doubly Vision with official Netflix is a total game changer. You'll have to get one of these Nebula X1 projectors to see how insane the picture really is. It transformed my backyard into a literal movie theater in just a couple of minutes. After using this projector for a couple days, I personally recommend it. If you guys get one, you won't regret it. Right now, Nebula is giving $700 off their early bird bundles. Click the link in the video description and get your Nebula projector today. After I'm done with the projector, I made it easy so I can just put it away. Some of our plants died last winter because it got too cold, so we decided to replace them with some stronger perennials that can withstand a lot colder temperatures. But as promised earlier in the video of the exact cost breakdown, here it is. We spent $4,377 including everything, which in my opinion is a fantastic deal. We added pavers, an actual fire pit, a bench, and a bunch of plants. But then just like that, the entire Paver Patio was all finished up.